Have you ever been out fishing before in your nice, modest boat with nice, modest fishing gear? And what's more, you pay for the land and water you're fishing on. And just, ever deal with some jackasses who show up out of nowhere with a yacht and are blasting music, like Nickelback or something, and instead of catching a modest amount of fish with simple fishing gear, these fuckers decide to just throw out a giant-ass net, and they either scare or catch most of the fish away. Well, even if you have not gone fishing before, I am certain most of us can relate to Iceland on some level, dealing with some asshole neighbors who you share some land or living space with, but they constantly overstep. This scenario is what would lead to not one, not two, but 3 fucking wars between Iceland and the UK. The Cod Wars were a series of 20th century confrontations between the United Kingdom and Iceland about fishing rights in the North Atlantic. That's right, fishing rights. Today on Historical Quarrels, we go over the events that lead up to these wars, with the most recent happening in 1975. And also, again, that's also right, this shit went on during our modern sensible age. It wasn't kingdoms bullying other kingdoms back in the medieval age. This was 2 modern-day countries arguing about who gets to fish where and who owns what area of the ocean. So, get your fishing poles and guns ready for today's Historical Quarrel. Welcome back to Historical Quarrels. I am the fishing master, catcher of all fish, ruler of the seas, Tyler Eckhardt. I want to thank everyone for patiently waiting for this week's episode. I know it sucks to have to wait for a show where you just want some funnies, some gags, and some facts. But you know what? That is what we have to do sometimes. Before we start the show, I do have a big announcement. Friend of the show and master craftsman Mike Ritz at newbeliefstudio.com has made some dope-ass key fobs with this show's logo on it. I'm planning on posting some pictures of them on our Instagram, and we are running a competition. We're giving away 9 of these limited edition key fobs to the listeners who leave the funniest/best 5-star reviews. Not sure when I'll announce the winners, but if you do leave a review, please message me, and you can do that by emailing me at historicalquarrels@gmail.com, or DMing me on Instagram, or you can also look up Tyler Eckhardt on Discord. You'll see just like it's a picture of me during for my wedding, which is like 5 years ago now. I probably should update it. I look a little different now, but it's whatever. Anyways, by doing this, if you email me, this will give me a way to reach out to you to let you know if you won the key fob. So, if you'd like to see what the key fobs look like, please go look up Historical Quarrels Instagram page. You can find that by looking up Historical Quarrels on Instagram. Thank you again, Mike Ritz. They look so fucking cool. Like they are seriously dope. They're awesome. I can't wait for you guys to check it out on Instagram. I'm going to post it right after I get done editing this episode. And if you guys are interested in some amazing leather work, please go check out newbeliefstudio.com. Mike Ritz does an amazing job. He's a really cool guy. He's great. Seriously, he makes some really dope shit. Go check it out. Okay, with that out of the way, first we'll be going over a bit of the history of humans fishing and its importance, especially back in the early period of civilization for the British Isles and the Icelanders. Then we'll go over some pre-1900s events that would lead into the first Cod War, and after that, we'll go right into the rest of the Cod Wars. So, sit back, get ready. Like I said earlier, get your fishing poles out, and let's get ready for some dope-ass tales on today's Historical Quarrel. You are listening to Historical Quarrels. Seafood has for centuries been a staple in the diet of the inhabitants of the British Isles, Iceland, and other Nordic countries, which are surrounded by some of the world's richest fisheries. Danish and Norse raiders came to Britain in the 9th century, bringing one fish species in particular, the North Sea cod, into the national diet. Other white fish like halibut, hake, and pollock also became popular. But let's go back in time a little bit to pre-Roman Britain, about 500 BC to 43 AD. Before the Roman invasion, the indigenous tribes of the British Isles were already proficient in fishing. Freshwater and coastal fishing was practiced using simple tools like spears, nets, and wicker traps. Fish such as salmon, eel, and trout were common staples, supplementing a diet primarily made up of agriculture and hunting gains. Around 43 AD to 410 AD, the Roman conquest introduced new fishing techniques and expanded the variety of fish consumed. Archaeological findings, including fish bones and fishing gear at Roman sites, indicate an increased reliance on fish. The Romans also introduced fish preservation methods such as salting and smoking, which allowed for longer storage and broader trade distribution and much better taste. Smoked fish, in my opinion, mixed with salted fish. I like to do a bit of salmon. What I do is I get a hunk of butter. I mix up that butter with like lemon, garlic, some salt, and lemon, garlic, and salt. And then I cut up lemons. I surround the fish on it, and then I also on the salmon, like on the meat part, I put in little chili flakes, and then I stick that in the oven at about like 425 degrees for about 15 minutes, and it is. I wrap it all up in aluminum foil as well. As soon as I get like a grill, like a little grill for my home, I'm going to start grilling it. Maybe do some wood smoked salmon, because that's so much better. But that comes out because I put the butter like on top of the salmon, or like I'll cut it up into like little bits and put it on different, like so it spreads evenly on the salmon. And when it comes out, oh my God, it is perfect. One of my favorite things to eat. My wife hates fish. She admits that when I make salmon, it's damn good, but normally she hates fish. So, now in the post-Roman retreat, 410 AD to 600 AD, with the Roman withdrawal, Britain saw a regression in organized fishing practices. However, local populations continued to fish, reverting to more traditional methods. Fish remained an essential part of the diet, especially in remote and coastal communities where agricultural practices were more challenging. Then around 600 AD to 1066 AD, we have the early medieval period. For the Saxon and Viking influence, these Saxon and later Viking invasions brought about significant changes. The Norse, in particular, were adept at sea fishing, and they introduced long line fishing and improved boat technology. Fish such as herring and cod began to appear more frequently in the diet. And then in 600 AD to 1066 AD, for the monastic fisheries, monasteries played a critical role in the advancement of fishing techniques. Monastic records from places like Lindisfarne and Iona that indicate sophisticated fish farming and water management practices, including the construction of fish ponds and regulated fishing rights. And then from 800 AD to 1066 AD, we have a huge expansion of trade. The growth of towns and trade networks under the Danelaw, or Viking rule, facilitated the spread of fish as a commodity. Fish markets became common, and preserved fish could travel far from their point of origin. Then we have the High Medieval period, which is about 1066 AD to 1200 AD. So post 1066, the Norman administration introduced feudal laws that impacted fishing rights and practices. Major rivers and coastal areas were often controlled by the nobility, who could dictate who was allowed to fish and where. Yeah, like the government nowadays, like the U.S. You have to go get a fucking permit to go fish, out in a lake. Yeah, man, I still think that's kind of a dumb thing to do. I understand it's to like regulate and keep the fish population healthy to a degree. It also just seems like it's, more of a way for them just to like skim money off the top of people who just like to fucking fish. It always seemed a little ridiculous to me that I had to pay money to, go out and fish and do something that humans have been doing since inception. Whatever. That's whatever. So during this period, fish became an increasingly important part of the European diet, especially on fast days mandated by the church, which required the consumption of fish instead of meat. Because that's what Jesus wants you to eat. He wants you to eat fish, instead of like cow. Okay. Cow is sacred. See, we also, view the cow, the heifer is sacred, okay? Improved shipbuilding techniques and navigational skills allowed for more extended fishing voyages and thus a greater variety of fish entered the local markets. letting you taste something more than salmon, but salmon is the best fish anyway, so you probably didn't ever need to really go get the other fish because you already had salmon. Just saying. All right. Now, taking it back a little bit, we're going to go to Iceland. It was a settlement from circa 870 AD. So, the settlement of Iceland by Norse explorers around 870 AD brought fishing into sharp focus. The island's cold and rough waters were rich in cod, haddock, and other North Atlantic species. The sagas, medieval Icelandic literature, frequently mention fishing. These texts provide evidence of the significance of sea fishing in the survival and economy of early Icelandic settlements. Like their British counterparts, Icelanders relied on drying and salting fish to ensure a stable food supply through the harsh winters. Again, since Iceland, these were Viking invaders, these people had already developed that system and didn't need to teach it to British Islanders. Fish quickly became a cornerstone of the Icelandic economy, a trend that continues to this day. The abundance of fish was crucial for the survival of early communities, and it was one of their primary exports. In both the British Isles and Iceland, the Catholic Church's dietary restrictions significantly influenced fishing activities. The requirement to eat fish on certain days meant that fishing was not just a commercial activity, but also a religious necessity. Over time, the intense focus on fishing influenced local ecosystems. In some areas, this led to the overfishing of certain species, prompting early forms of fishery management and conservation efforts. The early practices and developments in fishing in the British Isles and Iceland not only provided essential nutrition, but also shaped the cultural and economic landscapes of these regions during the periods from 500 BC to 1200 AD. So, as you guys can see, fishing was the most important thing for these people. And they had already started to deal with a bit what could happen with overfishing and with the decrease in, population for certain fish species. And this was like their main source of trade for Iceland, right? The British Isles had fish trade, but it was not nearly as important nor as big as it was for Iceland. That's Iceland's bread and butter. British Isles had a bunch of other shit, like tea. Mostly tea, but Iceland relied a bit more heavily on it. And by the end of the 14th century, fishing boats from the east coast of England, then as now home to most of the English fishing fleet, were sailing to Icelandic waters in search of these catches. Their landings grew so abundant as to cause political friction between England and Denmark, who ruled Iceland at the time. The Danish king Eric banned all Icelandic trade with England in 1414 and complained to his English counterpart Henry V about the depletion of fishing stocks off the island. He was like, well, hi there, fella, can you please stop fishing in our ports? And then England was like, no, fuck you, I'm going to go ahead and just fish wherever the fuck I want. And then the Danish king was like, well, then I'm going to have to go ahead and make sure that you can't go and fish here, so I'm going to put a ban here. And you remember what we did to your monasteries about 300 years ago, right? Fine. And then also Henry V, was dealing with a bunch of other shit at the time, mostly trying to deal with France, and probably didn't want to fight Iceland. So they didn't go to war quite yet, but it did piss off. It did piss off a lot of rich people. Restrictions on British fishing passed by Parliament were generally ignored and unenforced, leading to violence and the Anglo-Hanseatic War, 1469 to 1474. Diplomats would end up resolving these disputes through agreements that allowed British ships to fish Icelandic waters with 7-year licenses, a provision that was struck from the Treaty of Utrecht when it was presented to the Icelandic Althing for ratification in 1474. This started a centuries-long series of intermittent disputes between the two countries. It could go on for almost 600 years, which is insane. Just England kept being like, nah, dude, I'm going to keep fishing here and depleting your resources because fuck you. From the early 16th century onward, English sailors and fishermen were a major presence in the waters off of Iceland. And I'm certain the Icelanders were always like, oh, these fucking British people, they always come in here and try to take all my fish. How dare they? That is so annoying. Just something like that. I don't know if my, it's really just like more of like a Danish or like a Swedish accent. So I probably need to go listen to some Icelanders speak, but I imagine since they all come from the same root, then again, that's kind of fucked up to say. That's like me saying, hey, everyone in America sounds the same, but it's like you go to Louisiana and you can't fucking understand shit in certain parts of it. So they probably don't have the same accent, but still, they were quite upset. But as they are of the Danish and of the Swede descent, I imagine they sounded just a bit nice about it. Just they sounded nice, but they were really angry, and they were going to go raid some monasteries. With the increases in range of fishing that were enabled by steam power in the late 19th century, boat owners and skippers felt pressure to exploit new grounds. Their large catches in the Icelandic waters attracted more regular voyages across the North Atlantic. In 1893, the Danish government, which then governed Iceland and the Faroe Islands, claimed a fishing limit of 50 nautical miles, or around 93 kilometers, around their shores. British trawler owners disputed the claim and continued to send ships to the waters near Iceland, which continued to upset the Icelanders. Like, oh, these fucking little United Kingdomers, how dare they, these British fucks. I'm so tired of it. They come and steal all my cod. I'm going to beat the shit out of them. And this was because the British government did not recognize the Danish claim on the grounds that setting such a precedent would lead to similar claims by the nations around the North Sea, which would damage the British fishing industry, which had become huge by this time, mostly due to the fact that they had the largest naval fleet in the world for 2-3 centuries during that time. And one of the largest. And this allowed them to claim a bunch of ocean as theirs, or it's weird to call it. I looked this up. I tried to look up what to call territory, ocean owned territory, and could not find anything for countries. So and it was kind of upsetting. It's just this is the part of the ocean. This is the nautical miles that you guys own. And again, England just wanted to make sure that other countries couldn't do it. So they really wanted to make sure Iceland couldn't do it, because that's where most of the fish were for them. And in 1896, the United Kingdom made an agreement with Denmark for British vessels to use any Icelandic port for shelter if they stowed their gear and trawl nets. Because again, the Icelanders were probably like, I don't want you coming in here with your ships, trying to steal all our fish. You better leave it back home. Yeah, you get out of here. In return, British vessels were not to fish in Faxa Bay, east of a line from fucking Icelandic Ilunipa, a promontory near Keflavik, to Portmusker, something like that. Okay. There's a lot of symbols on here that I'm not even I know one's an accent that's supposed to make the O longer, usually usker, Portmusker, something like that. With many British trawlers being charged and fined by Danish gunboats for fishing illegally within the 13 nautical mile limit, which the British government refused to recognize. They kept being like, nuh-uh, they're not doing that. I don't give a shit. How dare you? Fuck you. You can go and fuck yourself, right? The British press began to inquire why the Danish action against British interests was allowed to continue without intervention by the Royal Navy. The British made a show of naval force gunboat diplomacy in 1896 and 1897. They were like, listen, you fucks, how dare you try to keep telling us that we can't fish there. Listen, I know that we signed an agreement 200 years ago, but fuck that agreement. And fuck you. You know we're stronger than you. We're going to fuck you up. In April 1899, the steam trawler Caspian was fishing off the Faroe Islands when a Danish gunboat tried to arrest her for allegedly fishing illegally inside the limits. The trawler refused to stop and was fired upon, first with blank shells. So, okay, the Danish here, the Icelanders, are being incredibly nice. We're talking 200 years at this point that they have warned these British assholes to get the fuck out of their waters. And they kept not doing it. And so even after that, they first are like, listen, we got to make a show of force here, guys. We don't actually want to kill them, but We can't let them keep walking all over us, man. Fired the blank shells. So they fired the fucking blank shells. And then when that didn't work, with live ammunition, eventually the trawler was caught. But before the skipper, Charles Henry Johnson, left his ship to go aboard the Danish gunboat, he ordered the mate to make a dash for it after he went onto the Danish ship. The Caspian set off at full speed. The gunboat fired several shots at the unarmed boat, but could not catch up with the trawler, which returned, heavily damaged, to Grimsby, England. On board the Danish gunboat, the skipper of the Caspian was lashed to the mast. A court held at Tórshavn was convicted him on several counts, including illegal fishing and attempted assault, and he was jailed for 30 days. Holy shit! That motherfucker was only in jail for 30 days for breaking international laws. Man, Iceland, you're being too nice. You have to be a dick. Listen. People are gonna walk over you if you aren't more of a dick to them. Okay, like I know you want to keep them as like a trading partner, and like that economy is important to you and all. But you got to do what America did. Okay. You got, slap your cock out hard and firm. You got to be like, listen, England, you're not going to be bullying me. Okay. You can bully India. You can bully all these other countries, but you're not getting me, you asshole. And that's kind of what they do with the Cod Wars. The Anglo-Danish Territorial Waters Agreement of 1901 set a 3 nautical mile territorial waters limit measured narrowly around each party's coastlines. This applied to Iceland, as at the time part of Denmark and had a term of 50 years. The Icelandic fisheries grew in importance for the British fishing industry around the end of the 19th century. The reduction in fishing activity brought about by the hostilities of the First World War effectively ended the dispute for a time. While data is incomplete for the pre-war period, one historian argues that the Icelandic fishing grounds were very important to the British fishing industry as a whole. Data from 1919 to 1938 showed a significant increase in the British total catches in Icelandic waters. The British catches in Iceland were more than twice the combined catches of all other grounds of the British distant water fleet. Icelanders grew increasingly dismayed at the British presence. They're like, I thought we showed these fucks that they shouldn't be doing that. I thought that they agreed. They keep signing these treaties and they don't honor them. Now I understand how the Native Americans feel. Like, goddamn, guys. And this shit is crazy. This is what led up. I'm talking like we have almost 500 years. It is 500 years of buildup of just Icelanders just being incredibly patient. 500 years of patience with Britain. And you can argue part of it is Britain was a very scary force and the threat of violence was very real from England. But still, can you imagine a country that's just like, okay, we're going to let them keep fishing here. We're going to be, try to be neighborly about it. I understand. It's like you're out fishing with your dad and your dad's just, he's not the most aggressive man out there. And these assholes come onto your land and they start fishing and they start taking all your fucking fish because they're fishing upstream from you where they're not supposed to be fishing. A bunch of fucking assholes. And he goes up to them. He's like, hey guys, can you not? And they just look at him and like, yeah, sure, man. Like whatever. Your dad walks back. He's like, okay, they agreed. And then, a couple hours later, they're still fucking there, just like drinking beer, pouring beer into the river, doing some crazy shit. And, he walks up there again. He's like, hey, no, seriously, guys, you guys got to go. This is our territory. And they just kind of like look at him and like they get up. They're college students. They're a bit ripped. And they're like, what the fuck are you going to do about it, huh? And then your dad's like, well, nothing right now. I'm just asking you to leave. And if you don't, I'll probably be forced to call the cops. And they're like, what? So you think you own all this? Huh? And then your dad's like, well, yeah, no, our family does, like they bought it like 100 years ago. And then, now it's in my name. And the college students, shut up, bro. Get the fuck out of here. I'll kick your ass. And then your dad goes back. He's like, well, I tried. I'm going to call the cops. And then the cops come out and they, the cops ask them to leave and then they leave for a little bit, but then they come back again. And that cycle kept repeating for 500 years between England and fucking Iceland. That level of patience is insane to me. And it demonstrates who the bad guys are in this situation clearly to me. England is clearly the aggressor, and Iceland should have whipped their ass a long time ago. Try to get some support to whip their ass a long time ago. Because goddamn, I would have, man, if I was that dad, I would have just brought a gun, pointed it, and been like, "Okay, get the fuck out. You're trespassing. This is your one warning." If they start coming at me, I live in a stand your ground state. And if I feel endangered for my life, I will shoot the kneecaps first, okay? And then they have a chance to live. But if they're in a boat and they fall over, I'm not going to aid them. I'm not going to like help them, stop from drowning. Oh man, no, but seriously, like it's just insane to me. Okay, let's go ahead and get into the first Cod War now. The first Cod War lasted from the 1st of September of 1958 to the 11th of March in 1961. It began as soon as a new Icelandic law came into force and expanded the Icelandic fishery zone from 4 to 12 nautical miles. At midnight on the 1st of September 1958. All members of NATO opposed the unilateral Icelandic extension. The British declared that their new trawlers would fish under protection from their warships in 3 areas. Out of the West Fjords, north of Horn, and southeast of Iceland. In all, 20 British trawlers, 4 warships, and a supply vessel were inside the newly declared zones. The deployment was expensive. In February of 1960, Lord Carrington, the First Lord of the Admiralty, responsible for the Royal Navy, stated that the ships near Iceland had expended £500,000 sterling worth of oil since the new year, and that a total of 53 British warships had taken part in the operations. Against that, Iceland could deploy 7 patrol vessels and a single PBY-6A Catalina flying boat. The deployment of the Royal Navy to contested waters led to protests in Iceland. Demonstrations against the British embassy were met with taunts by the British ambassador, Andrew Gilchrist, as he played bagpipe music and military marches on his gramophone. Fucking goddamn. England is such an asshole. That, again, my analogy of those asshole college students just like coming out, they'd probably just pay, the equivalent would be those college students playing like fucking Katy Perry or something. So your dad, just like slowly turning up the music louder and louder. Just I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I can't hear you of all this awesome bagpipe music, from the Scots and the Irish people that we like to abuse the fuck out of as well. Many incidents followed. The Icelanders were, however, at a disadvantage in patrolling the contested waters because of the size of the area and the limited number of patrol ships, according to one historian. Only the flagship Thor could effectively arrest and, if necessary, tow a trawler to harbor. On the 4th of September, ICGV Yer, an Icelandic patrol vessel built in 1929, attempted to take a British trawler off the West Fjords, but was thwarted when HMS Russell intervened, and the 2 vessels collided. On the 6th of October, the VS Maria Julia fired 3 shots at the trawler Kingston Emerald, forcing the trawler to escape to sea. And then on the 12th of November, Thor encountered the trawler Hackness, which had not stowed its nets legally. Hackness did not stop until Thor had fired 2 blanks and 1 live shell off its bow. Again with the blanks. Fuck, dude. These guys, they're not fucking... England's not fucking around, man. They basically ignored your guys' protests to your law that you passed. Again, this was to protect waters near you. Okay, this is to protect your trade that's important to your country. And these assholes are like, nah, dude, we want to make more money. Fuck, you guys can just stay poor. You all can just stay poor, right? Like, you don't really care about that. You don't care about wealth. It's fine if we keep it all for ourselves. Because fuck you. Once again, HMS Russell came to the rescue, and its shipmaster ordered the Icelandic captain to leave the trawler alone, as it was not within the 4 nautical miles limit recognized. Then that's the limit they recognized by the British government, but they had increased it to 12 nautical miles. So it was well within there. The captain of Thor, Erik Kristofferson, said that he would not do so and ordered his men to approach the trawler with the gun manned. In response, the Russell threatened to sink the Icelandic boat if it fired a shot at the Hackness. More British ships then arrived and the Thor retreated. Again, because they had to. They just didn't have like those, backup yet. Icelandic officials threatened to withdraw Iceland's membership of NATO and to expel U.S. forces from Iceland unless a satisfactory conclusion could be reached to the dispute. Even the cabinet members who were pro-Western proponents of NATO and the U.S. defense agreement were forced to resort to threats, as that was Iceland's chief leverage, and it would have been political suicide not to use it. Thus, NATO engaged in the formal and informal mediations to bring an end to the dispute. Following the United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea between 1960 and 1961, the UK and Iceland came to a settlement in late February of 1961, which stipulated 12 nautical miles, 22 kilometers Icelandic fishery limits, but that Britain would have fishing rights in allocated zones and under certain seasons in the outer 6 nautical miles for 3 years. The Icelandic Althing approved the agreement on the 11th of March, 1961, and they were probably all like, oh, I'm glad they're going to finally agree to our terms. That's very good. I'm so happy that we finally were able to reach this agreement. Even though that we already fucking did this agreement like 200 years ago. The deal was very similar to the one that Iceland had offered in the weeks and days leading up to its unilateral extension in 1958. Pretty much, that was the deal that they were already offering. And, Britain was going to ignore it until they, were going to withdraw from NATO. And the U.S. could not have its troops not be there. They needed to be in Iceland. Okay, it was important. They need to keep an eye on things. It was an important area for the U.S. government. And so the U.S. government was like, listen, England. I know you like shoving your big British cock in Icelanders and all these other countries' faces. Like, we get it. Listen, we do. We just got over the whole slavery thing. Okay, and we're still kind of being super racist over here. But Iceland's location, man, is pretty strategic. Okay, buddy. And then England had to be like, oh, fine. Fuck it. Fine. If you want to do it, U.S., you kicked us out the first time. And you're the only one who, did the right thing to show us by force that we, couldn't bully you. So fine. Fuck it. We'll agree. As part of the agreement, it was stipulated that any future disagreement between Iceland and Britain in the matter of fishery zones would be sent to the International Court of Justice and the Hague. Which, pretty much what happened. The second Cod War between the United Kingdom and Iceland lasted from September of 1972 until the signing of a temporary agreement in November of 1973. The Icelandic government again extended its fishing limits. God damn it, God damn those Icelanders. How dare they keep extending their own area? Fuck them. We don't have enough land, for ourselves. The Icelandic government again extended its fishing limits now to 50 nautical miles. It had 2 goals in extending the limits. Number 1, to conserve fish stocks, and 2, to increase its share of total catches. The reasons that Iceland pursued the 50 nautical mile fishery limits rather than 200 nautical mile limits that they had also considered were that the most fruitful fishing grounds were within the 50 nautical miles, and that patrolling a 200 nautical mile limit would have been more difficult. So, they're trying to be conservative here. Like, listen, this is what we can patrol. This is what we can handle. We don't need to do 200 nautical miles. 50 nautical miles is going to be plenty. The British contested the Icelandic extension with 2 goals in mind. 1, to achieve the greatest possible catch quota for British fishermen in the contested waters, and 2, to prevent a de facto recognition of a unilateral extension of a fishery jurisdiction, which would set a precedent for other extensions in the future. Again, they're just afraid of losing more and more fishing rights as well. Like, you got to remember, for the past almost 2,000 years, since humans had been humans, right? Since civilization existed, both these countries, I shouldn't say both. England, first, but they were only fishing like maybe not even 1 nautical mile off the coast. They were fishing off their coasts. Fishing has been a staple diet, and has been an important trade economically for the countries. Okay. All Western European states and the Warsaw Pact opposed Iceland's unilateral extension. African states declared support for Iceland's extension after a meeting in 1971, where the Icelandic prime minister argued that the Icelandic cause was a part of a broader battle against colonialism and imperialism. Just true. On September 1st of 1972, the enforcement of the law expanded the Icelandic fishery limits to 50 nautical miles. This is when it began. And as soon as it began, numerous British and West German trawlers continued fishing within the new zone on the first day. The Icelandic leftist coalition, then governing, ignored the treaty that stipulated the involvement of the International Court of Justice. It said that it was not bound by agreements made by the previous center-right government with Ludvig Josefsson, the fisheries minister, stating that the basis for our independence is economic independence. They wanted to, again, just be economically independent from Britain and Germany. The next day, the brand new patrol ship ICGV Aegir, built in 1968, chased 16 trawlers in the waters east of the country, out of the 50 nautical mile zone. The Icelandic Coast Guard started to use net cutters to cut trawling lines of non-Icelandic vessels fishing within the new exclusion zone. They're like, you get the fuck out of here. We told you for the past 500 years to not be bothering us. Get out of our waters. On the 5th of September of 1972 at 10:25, ICGV Aegir, under Guðmundur Kjarnested's command, encountered an unmarked trawler fishing northeast of Hornbanki. The master of the black-hulled trawler refused to divulge the trawler's name and number, and after being warned to follow the Coast Guard's orders, played Rule Britannia over the radio. Rule Britannia. Oh my God. England, man, you fucks are hilarious, but you're assholes. At 10:40, the net cutter was deployed into the water for the first time, and the Aegir sailed along the trawler's port side. The fishermen tossed a thick nylon rope into the water as the patrol ship closed in, attempting to disable its propeller. After passing the trawler, he veered into the trawler's starboard side. The net cutter, 160 fathoms behind the patrol vessel, sliced one of the trawling wires. As ICGV came about to circle the unidentified trawler, its angry crew threw coal as well as waste and a large fire axe at the Coast Guard vessel. Fuck you, you bunch of assholes. Trying to, take away, our fishing rights. We've been fishing here just as long as you have. I know this is very close to Iceland, but fuck you. This is our area. British dominance, damn it. A considerable amount of swearing and shouting came through the radio, which resulted in the trawler being identified as Peter Scott. And there is a full transcript of everything that was fucking said. So let's go ahead and listen to what Peter Scott yelled at the Icelander Coast Guard. Well, listen here, you bunch of fucking twat beanies. If you lot think you can just upend an agreement that was already reached with England, you bunch of fucking knobs, I'll fucking gut you. The Queen will send all of England and God's wrath upon you, you bunch of knitting whacking twats. And so, yeah, apparently that's what he yelled. And then on the 25th of November of 1972, a crewman on the German trawler Erlangen suffered a head injury as an Icelandic patrol ship cut the trawler's trawling wire, which struck the crewman. And so on the 18th of January, 1973, the nights of 18 trawlers were cut. That forced the British seamen and all their seamen to leave the Icelandic fishery zone unless they had the protection of the Royal Navy. The next day, large, fast tugboats, so you had to tug out the seamen, were sent to their defense. The first being the Statesman. The British, I swear to God, I'm cutting off here real quick. All Navy and the names for all of it is just an allegory for jacking off and coming. Like every tugboats. Are you fucking kidding me? Seamen, come on. Like they were having a giggle when they were deciding the names for this. I swear to God. Okay. The British considered that to be insufficient and formed a special group to defend the trawlers. And so on the 23rd of January, 1973, the volcano Eldfell on Heme erupted, forcing the Coast Guard to divert its attention to rescuing the inhabitants of the small island. And on the 17th of May, the British trawlers left the Icelandic waters only to return 2 days later when they were escorted by British frigates. The naval deployment was codenamed Operation Dewey. Hawker Siddeley Nimrod, The Imrad jets flew over the contested waters and notified British frigates and trawlers of the whereabouts of Icelandic patrol ships. Icelandic statesmen were infuriated by the entry of the Royal Navy and considered to appeal to the UN Security Council or call for Article 5 of the NATO Charter to be implemented. According to Frederick Irving, the U.S. ambassador to Iceland at the time, Icelandic Prime Minister Olafur Jóhannesson demanded that the U.S. send jets to bomb the British frigates. They're like, we are so fucking tired of these goddamn British assholes coming into our waters. U.S., if you're really an ally of us, you will send your jets and you will bomb them. And the U.S. was like, no. There were major protests in Reykjavik on the 24th of May, 1973. All the windows of the British embassy in Reykjavik were broken. 500 years of this imperialistic bullshit by Britain has led to this. And on the 26th of May, the Aegir was ordered the Grimsby trawler Everton to stop. But the captain of the fishing vessel refused to submit. The incident was followed by a protracted pursuit during which the Aegir fired first blank warning shots, later live rounds in order to disable the trawler. Again, they're not even shooting to kill these motherfuckers. They're just like, get the fuck out of here. Like chasing them out of their land that they had claimed. And England was, basically trying to say like, listen, you can't claim that land. Okay. Like you can't claim that part of the ocean. That's our ocean. All of this is our ocean. Fuck you. Everton was hit on her bow by 4 57mm shells, and water began to rush in, but managed to limp to the protection zone, where she was assisted by the frigate HMS Jupiter. Emergency repairs were carried out by a naval team from Jupiter. Prime Minister Olafur Jóhannesson said about the incident that this was a natural and inevitable law enforcement action. This was what was going to happen if they kept doing this, these bunch of fucking assholes. They're getting really, really frustrated here, Iceland. The Icelandic lighthouse tender, the VS Arvakur, collided with 4 British vessels on the 1st of June and 6 days later on the 7th of June. Aegir collided with the HMS Silja when the former was connoitering for icebergs off of the West Fjords near the edge of the Greenland ice sheet. The Icelandic Coast Guard reported that Silja had been shadowing and harassing the Icelandic patrol boat. They've been doing this for too long, God damn it. The British Ministry of Defense claimed that the gunboat intentionally rammed the British frigate. Which, yeah, it did, but it was to get you guys the fuck out of there. And so on the 29th of August, the Icelandic Coast Guard suffered the only confirmed fatality of the conflict, when ICGV Year collided with HMS Apollo. Halldór Hallfreðsson, an engineer on board the Icelandic vessel, died by electrocution from his welding equipment after seawater flooded the compartment in which he was making hull repairs. That sucks for that guy. The only death in that war. On the 29th of August, the Icelandic Coast Guard suffered the only confirmed... On the 16th of September, 1973, Joseph Lund, Secretary General of NATO, arrived in Reykjavik to talk with Icelandic ministers who had been pressed to leave NATO as it had been of no help to Iceland in the conflict. Britain and Iceland were both NATO members. The Royal Navy made use of bases in Iceland during the Cold War to fulfill its primary NATO duty, guarding the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap. After a series of talks with NATO, British warships were recalled on the 3rd of October. Trawlermen played Rule Britannia over the radios, as they had done when the Royal Navy entered the waters. They also played the parties over. Not kidding you. Fucking as well. An agreement was signed on the 8th of November to limit British fishing activities to certain areas inside the 50 nautical mile limit. The agreement resolving the dispute was approved by the All-Thing on the 13th of November, 1973. The agreement was based on the premise that British trawlers would limit their annual catch to no more than 130,000 tons. The Icelanders were reportedly prepared to settle for 156,000 tons in July of 1972, but had increased their demands by spring of 1973 and coffered 117,000 tons. The agreement expired in November of 1975, and this is when the Third Cod War would begin. But the Second Cod War threatened Iceland's membership in NATO and the U.S. military presence in Iceland. It was the closest that Iceland had come to canceling its bilateral defense agreement with the U.S. Icelandic NATO membership and hosting of U.S. military had considerable importance to the Cold War strategy because of Iceland's location in the middle of the Guyuk Gap. They're pretty goddamn close. Like storing a bunch of shit in Iceland, is kind of useful for if we want to bomb the fuck out of Russia. So it's important for us. After the entry of the Royal Navy in the contested waters, at any given time, 4 frigates and an assortment of tugboats would generally protect the British trawling fleet. Over the course of this Cod War, a total of 32 British frigates had entered the contested waters. On the 19th of July, 1974, more than 9 months after the signing of the agreement, one of the largest wet fish stern trawlers in the British fleet, the CS Forster, which had been fishing inside the 12 nautical mile limit, was shelled and captured by the Icelandic gunboat, Thor. Thor has been doing a lot of work this war, swear to God. After a 100 nautical mile pursuit, CS Forster was shelled with non-explosive ammunition after repeated warnings. The trawler was hit by at least 2 rounds, which damaged the engine room and a water tank. She was later boarded and towed to Iceland. Skipper Richard Taylor was sentenced to 30 days imprisonment and fined £5,000, or 5,000 euros. He was released on bail after the owners paid 2,232 euros. Her owners additionally paid a total of 26,300 euros for the release of the ship. The trawler was allowed to depart with the catch of 200 tons of fish. So, goddamn, the worst part is there's a third fucking Cod War, guys. There's 3 times. England kept doing this shit, man. There's probably still some disagreement to this day. At the Third United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea in 1973, several countries supported a 100 nautical mile limit to territorial waters. And on the 15th of July, 1975, the Icelandic government announced its intention to extend its fishery limits. The Third Cod War, November of 1975 to June of 1976, began after Iceland again extended its fishing limits, now to 200 nautical miles from its coast. And this is where the overreach, I can start to see 200. But then again, it's like, I was kind of looking at a map. 200 nautical miles is pretty far, but it's not the worst. I don't know. I can see, especially where people are already a bunch of businesses and a bunch of trade routes have been dependent on this already. And Iceland just keeps being like, listen, just stay away. The British government did not recognize the large increase to the inclusion zone, and so issue occurred with the British fishermen and their activity in the disputed zone. The conflict, which was the most hard-fought of the Cod Wars, saw British fishing trawlers have their nets cut by Icelandic Coast Guard, and there were several incidents of ramming by Icelandic ships and British trawlers, frigates, and tugboats. One of the most serious incidents occurred on the 11th of December 1975. As reported by Iceland, Thor, under the command of Helgi Halvorsson, was leaving port at, oh my God, there's no way I'm pronouncing this, Seyðisfjörður, where it had been minesweeping. It sounds like I cast a fucking wizard spell right there. God damn. When orders were received to investigate the presence of unidentified foreign vessels at the mouth of the fjord, the vessels were identified as 3 British ships: Lloydsman, an ocean-going tug 3 times bigger than Thor; Star Aquarius, an oil rig supply vessel of British Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food; and the latter's sister ship, Star Polaris. They were sheltering from a Force 9 gale within Iceland's 12 nautical mile territorial waters. In the Icelandic account, when ordered to leave Icelandic territorial waters by the commander of Thor, the 3 tugboats initially complied. However, around 2 nautical miles from the coast, Star Aquarius allegedly veered to starboard and hit Thor's port side. As the Coast Guards attempted to overtake her, even as Thor increased speed, Lloydsman again collided with its port side. Thor had suffered considerable damage by these hits, so when Star Aquarius came about, a blank round was fired from Thor. That did not deter Star Aquarius, as it hit Thor a second time. Another shot was fired from Thor as a result, this time a live round, which that hit the bow of Star Aquarius. Then the tugboats retreated. Thor was close to sinking after the confrontation, sailed to Lumundafjord for temporary repairs. God damn, Iceland fucking, and just all Nordic countries with these fucking names, man. Just be more like Norway. I can pronounce also. It's kind of it. Norway had a few more easy names. The British reports of the incident differ considerably and maintain that Thor attempted to board one of the tugboats as Thor broke away. Lloyd's men searched forward to protect Star Aquarius. Captain Albert Mackenzie of the Star Aquarius said that Thor approached from the stern and hit the support vessel before it veered off and fired a shot from a range of about 100 yards. Niels Sigurdsson, the Icelandic ambassador in London, said that Thor had been firing in self-defense after it had been rammed by British vessels. Iceland consulted the UN Security Council over the incident, which declined to intervene because they're like, guys, we're fucking tired of Iceland and Britain doing this shit. Fucking just leave each other alone. Just stop talking. It's like when your kids are fighting and you're like, listen, just leave each other alone. You go to your room if you have that, option. Or you send one into like your bedroom, like the parents' bedroom, and you send the other one into like their room. You're like, just don't talk to each other. Don't look at each other. Like that was going on. The UN just was sick of it. 500 years of this bullshit. The immediate Royal Navy response was to dispatch a large frigate force, which was already well on the way to Icelandic waters before the Prime Minister Harold Wilson or the Foreign Secretary Anthony Crossland were informed. So they were already planning on starting this shit. The Royal Navy saw the opportunity to demonstrate the capabilities of its older Type 12 and Type 81 frigates for sustained deployment in the area of the Denmark Strait, where they were expected to deter the passage of Soviet submarines, while the Royal Navy was threatened by further serious defense and naval cuts by the Royal Navy's chief Bette Noir, the Chancellor of Exchequer and former Minister of Defense Denis Healey. The Royal Navy saw a strategic aim at the time to be as much fighting Healey as the Soviet Navy. The second and third Cod Wars were seen as necessary conflicts by the Royal Navy, like the Falklands War 6 years later to Crossland. Also MP for the trawler port of Grimsby, the Third War was a more serious threat to Western alliance than was the Middle East, which I guess for across the waters from the U.S. I'm sure it was. For the U.S., the Middle East is a little more intense. Another incident occurred in January of 1976 when the HMS Andromeda collided with Thor, which sustained a hole in its hull. A hole in its hull. Fuck English. The hull of the Andromeda was dented. The British Ministry of Defense said that the collision represented a deliberate attack on the British warship without regard for life. The Icelandic Coast Guard, on the other hand, insisted that the Andromeda had rammed Thor by overtaking the boat, then swiftly changing course. The incident, and facing a growing number of ships enduring dockyard repairs, the Royal Navy ordered a more cautious approach in dealing with the enemy cutting the trawlers' warps. How dare they? And so on the 19th of February 1976, the British Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, Fred Preet, announced that a fisherman from Grimsby had become the first British casualty of the Third Cod War, when a hawser hit and seriously injured him after Icelandic vessels cut a trawl. While a British parliamentary source reported in a 1993 debate that a British trawlerman was accidentally killed by a solid shot fired by an Icelandic patrol boat, this suggestion had not been corroborated by any other historical source. So this might have been just England telling the public, like, listen, they killed someone. We got to go fuck them up. All right, guys, I need you to be okay with this. This is not imperialism. We're not being assholes. We're defending ourselves, clearly. Britain deployed a total of 22 frigates and ordered the reactivation from reserve of the Type 41 frigate HMS Jaguar and Type 61 HMS Lincoln, refitting them as specialist ramming craft with reinforced wooden bows. In addition to the frigates, the British also deployed a total of 7 supply ships, 9 tugboats, and 3 support ships to protect its fishing trawlers. But only 6 to 9 of the vessels were on deployment at any one time. The Royal Navy was prepared to accept serious damage to its Cold War frigate fleet, costing millions and disabling part of its North Atlantic capacity for more than a year. HMS Yarmouth had its bow torn off. HMS Diomede had a 40-foot gash ripped through her hull, and HMS Eastbourne suffered such structural damage from ramming by Icelandic gunboats that it had to be reduced to a moored operational training frigate. Iceland deployed 4 patrol vessels and 2 armed trawlers. The Icelandic government tried to acquire U.S. Asheville-class gunboats, and when it was denied by Henry Kissinger, fucking asshole, it tried to acquire Soviet Merkur-class frigates instead. A more serious turn of events came when Iceland threatened the closure of NATO base at Keflavik, which would have seriously impaired NATO's ability to deny access to the Atlantic Ocean to the Soviet Union. As a result, the British government agreed to have its fishermen stay outside Iceland's 200 nautical miles exclusion zone without a specific agreement. On the evening, again, they keep pissing off Denmark, and they're like, listen, I don't want to have to turn into a communist country. I do not want to have to work with the Soviets. I don't like them just as much as you, but I will, I swear to God, if British keeps fucking up over here. I'm tired of this bullshit. I will make my people suffer, and we will become communists, goddammit. Oh, man. So on the evening of May 6, 1976, after the outcome of the Third Cod War had already been decided, Tyr was trying to cut the nets of trawler Carlisle when Captain Gerald Palmer of HMS Falmouth ordered it rammed. Falmouth, at a speed of more than 22 knots, or 25 miles per hour, rammed Tyr, almost capsizing her. Tyr did not sink and managed to cut the nets of Carlisle, and Falmouth rammed it again. Tyr was heavily damaged and found herself propelled by only a single crew and pursued by the tugboat Statesman. In the dire situation, Captain Gulmundur Jarnested gave orders to man the guns. In spite of the overwhelming superiority of firepower HMS Falmouth enjoyed to deter any further ramming, in return, Falmouth suffered heavy bow damage. The Third Cod War saw 55 ramming incidents altogether. In NATO-mediated sessions, an agreement was reached between Iceland and the UK on the 1st of June 1976. The British were allowed to keep 24 trawlers within the 200 nautical mile limit and fish a total of 30,000 tons. While Iceland came closest to withdrawing from NATO and expelling U.S. forces in the Second Cod War, Iceland actually took the most serious action in all of the Cod Wars and the Third Cod War by ending diplomatic relations with the United Kingdom on the 19th of February 1976. Although the Icelandic government was firmly pro-Western, the government likened Iceland's NATO membership with the outcomes of the fishery dispute. If a favorable outcome could not be reached, Iceland implied that it would withdraw from NATO. However, the government never explicitly linked the U.S. defense agreement to the outcome of the dispute. So they're like, I swear to God, I will leave NATO. But U.S., you're kind of cool still. I'll keep you here. Maybe. Maybe. So Iceland would achieve its overall aims. And as a result, the already declining British fisheries were hit hard by being excluded from historical prime fishing grounds. And the economies of the large northern fishing ports in the United Kingdom, such as Grimsby, Hull, and Fleetwood, were severely affected, with thousands of skilled fishermen and people in the related trades being put out of work. The cost for repairing the damaged Royal Navy frigates was probably over £1 million at the time. In 2012, the British government offered a multi-million pound compensation deal and apology to fishermen who lost their livelihoods in the 1970s. More than 35 years after the workers lost their jobs, the £1,000 compensation offered to 2,500 fishermen was criticized for being insufficient and excessively delayed, which is very true. It's like, you fucks kept telling us to go out there to go fish, and you lost us all this shit. How dare you? And so, yeah, that brings us to the end of today's historical Quarrel. Well, guys, that was a fun one. Hope you guys enjoyed that. What were your thoughts? I'm curious to know what you guys thought about this. And I just kept finding it funny that Iceland, I'd say by the third one, the 200 nautical miles at that point did kind of impact a lot of jobs. And so I could see how England saw it to be semi-necessary. But at the same time, 200 nautical miles off of the coast of a country. Let's look this up. So 200 nautical miles off coast of U.S. Like, let's see how far that is. Exclusion zone. 200 nautical miles would be like from here all the way, like from like, let's say Washington almost to like Midway Island. Well, I wouldn't say almost to Midway Island, but like pretty far off. But like not that far off. You definitely, I'd say like if you had warboats out there, you probably wouldn't be able to like shoot inland at all, but you get pretty damn close. 50 nautical miles for sure. Like, and 12 nautical miles. Yeah, definitely nowadays you could fuck some people up. And so I can see where Iceland's fears are. I do think this was just another form of British imperialism overall. Like they were just trying to, whip out the big English cock and be like, hey, listen here, you fucks. I'm going to make you suck this dick. You're going to like it. It's going to be real good for you. It's going to be all tasty and shit. It's going to have some British sweets on it. British sweets. I mean, we don't actually have any sweets at all. There's like bland flavor and all of it. It's going to have beans on it, right? You're going to have beans on my cock. That's what you're going to enjoy. And you're going to like it, right? I mean, I might stew some tea for you, but my nutsack will be in the water as well, getting a nice little bath for them. Okay. But I will put some Earl Grey tea packets in there as well. We'll steam that. And Iceland's like, how dare you? I fucking hate you. I'll kick your ass. But yeah, it's just more Britain being assholes to other countries like Ireland. They're especially good at pissing off Ireland. Yeah, it's crazy. Like at that time, from like the 50s to the 70s, Britain was in the middle of just a bunch of other wars too. England and France and the US, I swear to God, have been like constantly at war or fighting someone since the US's inception, essentially. And then England really has just constantly been at war. The world is usually constantly at war in some part of it, right? Humans are just constantly fighting each other, which is insane to me. Boy. Not even that tired, but a little sleepy. Seriously though, guys, those key fobs, if you want them, leave a review. I'm going to pick out the 9 funniest ones I find, that were, any date past the April 15th. That's the day this episode drops. And, just send me a message after you leave a review. Tell me where you left the review and, like what you said, or you just like say, hey, I left this here. If you have an email, just send me an email. That's easier. And then I'll contact you. Be like, listen, you won. Where am I shipping this to? And then I'll just ship it out. So I'll announce the winners after a set amount of time, after, enough reviews have been done. So it gives people enough time, probably like in a month or two, and send everything out. So that's the game plan. I hope this episode was good. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun researching it. I thought it was fucking crazy what England did. Still think it's fucking crazy. So I was having a real good time researching this episode. I just was not able to get everything typed up and like in a cohesive format before the day that I'm recording today. So, and next week we're going to be doing a short story, as mentioned in my update episode. If you didn't listen to that, I'm going to be doing long, kind of like hour and a half episodes, and then the following week will usually be like a half hour, 15 to 30 minute, half hour story. So the longer episodes, I can have more time to research and like get more quotes, do more things, just do more things and make the show better overall. That's my goal. I want the show to be fucking dope. I want to be something you guys love to listen to and constantly enjoy. That's all. I love you all. Thank you so much. You have a good one. Peace out. Bye-bye.